Hey, it's Donny A. Do you hate playing an F bar chord and struggle with it? If so, this lesson's going to be for you. We're going to go into some tips on how to play it, and we're also going to talk about some different F chord voicings that you could use instead to keep you interested and keep you coming back to the guitar. All right, the dreaded F bar chord. So this is a chord that gets a lot of beginners a lot of trouble, and that's due to the fact that there's so much tension here on this first fret to hold these strings down, and that's because it's right next to the nut. So there's a lot more tension to hold down an F bar chord than say even a G bar chord or an A bar chord. It kind of just gets easier once you get into the middle here. So some techniques I wanted to talk about on how to make this a little easier on beginners and just everybody in general is how you hold down that bar. But first, let's talk about what an F bar chord is. So what you want to do is you want to fret the first fret on the low E string. You want to fret the third fret on the A string, the third fret on the D string, the second fret on the G string, and then the first fret on the B and the high E string. And that is the E major shape. If you were playing an open chord, that would be an E major. And you move that down and you bar that first fret. And I think what a big mistake that a lot of beginners make is that they try and bar this entire fret with just their finger. And you don't need to push down every string. There's 3 strings that are already covered because you're fretting this shape on the A, D, and G string. So you don't need to fret those notes. You don't need to put all that pressure there. So if you see my finger kind of has a curve in it, and that's how what I do is I fret the low E, the first fret of the low E, and then I fret the B and high E string. And then the other strings, I'm kind of just hovering over them. It'd be similar to how I would mute a string, right? Like if I fret this like this, I have the low E, and then I'm muting the A, muting the D, muting the G, and then I'm fretting the B and the high E string. So that takes a lot of pressure off of my finger here trying to fret this whole thing. So that's something I recommend you try. It's not going to be easy at first. It's going to take some getting used to, just like everything else. But I think once you get that done, you'll realize it's not quite as hard. And then in addition to that, if you're still having a lot of trouble with that, I think it'd be much better if you worked on your bar chords up the neck. So you could work on like your G or A, the ones up the neck, because they're easier to fret. And once you get that technique down, it'll be easier to do this F bar chord. And in the meantime, I have some different chord voicings that you could use. So one of the nice things about this F bar chord is that it's very low. It's got that deep sound to it because of where it's played on the guitar. It's got this very deep sound to it. And if that's what you're going for in the song that you're playing, then one thing you can do is, instead of worrying about even playing the B and high E string, you can just skip those. And what you can do is, if you rest your finger over this and just fret this top note, you're most likely going to end up muting that B and high E anyways. And you'll still be playing an F chord if you played the 1 on the low E string, the 3 on the A, and the 3 on the D string, and then the 2 on the G string, and then you would end up muting the B and E. And that's with those 2 strings muted, and you still get that deep F chord sound. And then this would be if you were going to play the full F bar chord. This is without the B and high E. So you just don't get that high, those high notes with it. But I think this is very usable in the context of a song. Like if you were playing C to G to F. I just muted those notes, and then if you weren't going to mute them, C to G to F. It's not that noticeable, so it's not something I think you need to worry about. If you wanted to work on getting your fingers in the right position to play an F bar chord, you could play just those bottom 4 strings, the lower 4 strings, the E, the A, the D, and the G. And then you'll naturally just mute the B and high E if you're being lazy about it and just putting your fingers over it. So that's one solution. Another solution, and this comes up in a lot of songs that I learn, is if you're playing a C chord, a lot of people play the F just like this. And then what I'm doing here is I'm fretting the D string at the 3rd fret, the G string at 2nd fret, and the B string at the 1st fret. And then typically I'm muting this high E, I'm muting this A string. And then that's an F chord as well. So that's just part of your bigger bar chord. You're fretting those notes as part of the bigger bar chord, but you're not playing the E, A, or high E string. And you can also let that high E string ring out if you want. That just makes it a major 7, kind of makes it sound a little prettier. If you really want to get crazy, you could fret the high E and the B string with one finger, as that would be the top of your bar chord. And then there's one other version of this that you can do, and that would be to fret. You would fret the 3rd fret of the A string, 3rd fret of the D string, 2nd fret of the G string, 1st fret of the B string, and then you can mute with your ring finger. You can kind of push up and mute the low E string, and then with your index finger you could mute the high E string, or again you could let that high E string ring out if you want, or you could bar it. That's one thing you do. And then if you really get fancy, you could pull your thumb over, but that's probably harder for a beginner than just learning the bar chord itself. But I hope this helps you out. I think it's some good tips. I wouldn't get super frustrated with this chord alone, right? Work on your bar chords higher up the neck. Once you feel comfortable with those, get those ringing out correctly, start trying to work on this F bar chord. I can tell you, I've been playing a long time, and I don't play that F bar chord very often at all. It was more of like a rite of passage for me to know that you can play that, and now it's typical that I would play something like that one a lot, especially if I'm mixing it with a C chord, G chord. But if I do feel like I need that deeper F sound, I typically throw my thumb over the top. It's easier on electric to throw your thumb over the top, depending. I have a wider neck on this guitar, but just know I still play F chords. I'm not worried if I see one come up in a song, obviously, but I'm not always playing bar chords like this once I figured out some more technique here. One other tip that I didn't go over that I really want to talk about is if you're a beginner guitar player, you may have a cheaper guitar, a beginner guitar that hasn't been set up yet. And you probably hear people talking about setups and you're like, I don't want to pay the money to go do that. I don't want to deal with it. I don't know if it's going to help. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I had the same thoughts when I was starting out. I never wanted to get a setup on a guitar, especially if you have $150 a guitar, you're going to go pay $50 to $100 for a setup on it. It just never really made sense to me. But once I finally got the first setup that I ever got, and that was actually on this guitar that I'm holding, the amount of pain that left my hand from playing was unbelievable. I thought that I couldn't play bar chords and I was having issues with them, and that it hurt too much to hold them down and everything, and I was like, my hand's not strong enough. And then I get the setup, they lower the string action, they get all the intonation, you know, worked out and everything, and plays like butter from then on. So I would highly recommend getting a setup. Just, you know, you're probably not going to want to do it if you're starting out, but if you're getting frustrated and you don't like playing the guitar, then it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it either way. I mean, you're just going to have more fun with it. You're going to enjoy it more. So definitely get a setup.